Hey, Corey Beth, he said in a deep, raspy voice. Look at me. How did I look in your mask? Almost gave me goosebumps, but not exactly that. I mean, it's kind of creepy, but yeah. Oh, hey everyone. I'm just going through my books. Goosebumps Haunted Mask. I'll tell you about it soon, but here's one thing I need to tell you folks. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why you guys were waiting for so long to see another video coming up, well, anyway, the reason why you've been waiting for so long is because my internet box went out, so I had to wait about a week until it starts working, and I'll be back in business. And right now I feel like an animal finally been released by my cage and ready to do whatever I want to do. And this is exactly, now, beside my problem, next month is going to be October. And do you know what's going to be on October? My favorite holiday of my favorite holiday! Halloween! My favorite holiday of the whole year. And right now I'm just going to be reviewing some things for this month. And on October, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to do something very, very special for Halloween. Something I always wanted to do every time when Halloween comes. But enough about Halloween I'm looking forward to. Today I'm going to be reviewing to you R.L. Stine's Goosebumps. Who hasn't forgot about Goosebumps, right? I mean, Goosebumps were like the Harry Potter of his time. It was really popular, it was very famous, and the author R.L. Stine, he wrote a lot of Goosebump books. And of course, this is what I have in my possession right here. My own collection of books by R.L. Stine of Goosebumps. I had more, but I lost them. So, and of course, not only R.L. Stine wrote Goosebump books, he also wrote another series called Fear Street. They're mostly psychological, but of course I have Ghosts of Fear Street, so there might be some monsters in it. But the rest of the story of Fear Street is supposed to be psychological horror series. And of course I have this one, another R.L. Stine, Horror of the Haunted Museum. And of course this one's a twist a point type of, it's like a choose your own ending kind of story. You know, ones that most people enjoy the most, where you have, when it tells you to turn the page, if you want to choose certain endings, it tell you to turn to page 7, tell you to turn to 75 or 67. And some of the stories always have a happy ending or a sad ending, and it depends on how you read it. And of course I have one of the Goosebump stories like that, right here. This one is called the Little Comic Shop of Horrors. In this one, you play a certain character who goes through your journey in a comic book store, and it's up to you if you choose to go through your situation in a horror comic area, like Tales from the Crypt kind of world, or go through the superhero world and see if you become a superhero or whatever. And of course, it had certain endings, and most of them were pretty bad, and I had to circle the good endings. But of course, that's one story that I got in my possession. The rest is just all Goosebumps. Now, Goosebump was the most popular story of its time. Back then, when I was really young, I remember all the kids, everybody I know, they all had Goosebumps. It's just Goosebump this, Goosebump that. And of course, they made a lot of merchandise. There were tons of toys, board games, and declarations, and even they made about 2 PC video games. One called Escape from Horrorland, and another one about my favorite story of all time. I'll get to that. And of course, they made a Wii video game for the Wii Station called Welcome to Horrorland, and also there was a TV series based from the books that Fox owned the rights of. But of course, there weren't that many audiobooks, and of course, Walt Disney Records produce and distribute the audiobooks, but they only made about a few. They didn't make all the audiobooks of all the stories. So that's kind of a loss there. And a lot of people used to say that R.L. Stine, the author of the books, his inspiration came from Tales from the Crypt comics. That's right. All those horror comics back in the 50s and 60s, he used to read them when he was a kid, and it inspired him to become a writer, except he decided to make his horror stories be more on a gentle level. So these stories are meant for teenagers, and nobody gets killed in these stories. I mean, they're just scary monster stories, and the teenager, and our main character is either a kid or a teenager, and they always go through a scary situation, and at the end, everybody lives happily ever after. Now, I remember when I was young, Goosebumps went there first. I mean, there was a TV series on Nickelodeon called Are You Afraid of the Dark? And the premise in that series was kind of similar to Goosebumps. And of course, I see that some of the shows, the TV series of Goosebumps, were very similar to Are You Afraid of the Dark? To Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because there's a lot of Canadian actors in it, and most of them were young. Some of the young actors are either good, and some of them are just need more acting lessons. And of course, one thing you can tell that they're Canadian, that most of the actors always kept on saying, about. What are you talking about? I want you out. And I know some of you are going to say it's about, but it's Canada. It's how they say it. Okay, eh? You hoser. So, I'm gonna talk about certain stories that I like and what I've been through in my my Goosebumps saga. So, beware, you're in for a scare. So, without further ado, here's the stories I've been through. I remember when the most popular story of all I ever heard was, of course, The Haunted Mask that you saw me read. It's pretty creepy, pretty scary. I haven't read the sequel. Stay Out of the Basement was pretty creepy. Monster Blood. Of course, it's kind of funny that the Monster Blood has, it's a little similar to the Blob. Ugh. My grandma's favorite, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. So, not only my grandma likes zombie movies and zombie stories, she also likes mummy stories. So her favorite monsters is not just zombies, she also likes mummies too. Oh, here's a creepy one. Slappy the Dummy from Night of the Living Dummy. I mean, I always know most of you guys always think that if you look at the ventriloquist dummy, they always look so creepy. Night in Terror Tower. And of course I have tons of other books like Say Cheese and Die and Welcome to Dead House. It was the first story of a century. And I also have one about a giant mantis. I forgot the title on that one. And This Is Why I'm Afraid of Bees. But Most of you people are wondering, what is my favorite story in the entire world? What is my number one favorite story in the whole world? Well, without further ado, this is my favorite of all time, folks. Attack of the Mutant. What is the story about, ladies and gentlemen, is why I like this story so much, because... Now, I know here's one thing I heard a lot about, that there is something kind of cliche about R.L. Stine, that most of his stories, the only thing it's cliche about his stories is that our main character always had to be a boy and a girl. The premise always have a boy and a girl involved. And in most of the stories, they're either best friends, boyfriend and girlfriend, or brother and sister, or cousins. And that's why they're together, and of course, they go through their journey, and they always go through a life and death situation, meeting monsters. Now, in this story here, why do I like it so much? Well, I'll tell you what it's all about. You see, there was a kid who goes by the name of Skipper Matthews, and this is comic book premise here. This story has a comic book premise. You see, there's a kid who goes by the name of Skipper Matthews, and what he does is he lives his entire life reading comic books. So he's kind of like me. I always read comic books all my life. And one thing, it never happens to me, but it happened to this kid, is that he has his whole collection of his favorite supervillain of all time. And his favorite villain is, of course, this guy. Goes by the name, the Masked Mutant. And what makes him so terrifying is he can shapeshift. And how he does that is he moves his molecules to turn himself into anything that is solid. And he also has a secret headquarters. And much to Skipper's surprise, he starts noticing and seeing the secret headquarters building to the Masked Mutant. And now he's getting really freaked out. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, think about it. What is so scary about a supervillain? Well, imagine this. I mean, if you're a superhero and you meet a supervillain, you're not so scared. You're pretty brave, you can take down the guy. But what if you're just an average Joe with no superpowers, and there is a supervillain with superpowers who starts haunting you, teasing you, and taunting you, and trying to kill you? Now that is scary. You know? I mean, imagine if the Joker comes over to you, waving a knife at you, saying, "Why so serious?" Or if you see Lex Luthor, he'll be like, "Do you know what happens if you take down Lex Luthor? The same thing will happen to Superman!" Or if you meet Dr. Doom, he'll be like, "How dare you come to my castle?" So it's kind of like that premise. It's really scary if you have no superpowers, you're not a superhero, but a supervillain mistaked you as a superhero, and all of a sudden, he starts coming after you and trying to kill you. Now that is scary. And this is the whole premise of this book is about. And this book was so good that when they did an episode of Goosebumps, when they get to this story, guess who was a special guest? Adam West as the superhero called Galloping Gazelle. I'm no longer a Batman, old chum. And he also did the voice of the Galloping Gazelle in the PC computer game they made called Attack of a Mutant. And it's the same premise, except in the in the PC video game, you play a normal average kid, and you battle against the Masked Mutant, and you also help out the League of Good Guys. And I love this book so much, along with all the other books. And I wish that somebody should do a comic book based from this. Of course, I heard that they made a comic book adaptation based from the novels. But I just like to have a comic book of this. And well, course, I'm thinking too much about it. Maybe do action figures of it, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, I have all my collection. I mean, some of it. Trying to find the rest of them, the ones that are lost. And of course, there are a few certain other books that I would like to have in my possession. Like, I don't have Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. If you want to know what that story is about, it's a Halloween-themed story. And of course, it's about this one girl who loves Halloween, but she gets picked on by two bullies who wants to make her Halloween end terribly. And also, she meets a new friend, and she misses her old neighbors, and what her old neighbors did is they turned themselves into humans with jack-o'-lanterns for heads to scare the crap out of those two bullies. And of course, there's a plot twist. It had like an M. Night Shyamalan twist to it, which I cannot tell you, it's a spoiler. And of course, I wish I also have Werewolf Skin. A story about a kid who goes to a small town and he's supposed to be raised by his aunt and uncle. And he starts noticing that the town is being horrified by a werewolf. And he meets a girl who is a good friend and a neighbor. And the most creepy part of all, he starts to realize that his aunt and uncle are werewolves. But they didn't go by the old tradition, get bitten by a werewolf, full moon rises, you turn into a wolf. Instead, his aunt and uncle starts wearing this werewolf costumes called wolfskin. So every time they put on the costume, they're the werewolves. And it has like a temptation to him. And his friend told her if they put the wolfskin somewhere else so the aunt and uncle wouldn't find them, they will be cured by putting that wolfskin out in the full moon, and the wolfskin will disappear, and they won't be tempted by the werewolf skin at all anymore. And of course, it has a twist in it on that one. And of course, now I heard that they made a Goosebump movie, and it's going to come this Halloween, and this is why I'm doing this special review for you today, ladies and gentlemen. And surprisingly, Jack Black is going to be in it. And I think he's playing R.L. Stine because he lives in a house full of Goosebump manuscripts. And the premise in the story is that there's a boy who moves into a neighborhood and likes this girl who lives next door. But this girl's father is Jack Black, and he's the writer of the Goosebump books. And his friend opened up the manuscript, and now all the monsters starts coming out of the pages and start creating some problems. So now it's up to them to deal with the monsters. And that's what the whole premise of the show go. Well, this is Multi-Voice Reviewer telling you folks, thank you for watching. Leave a comment, put a like on it, and subscribe. And beware, you're in for a scare.